I call this meeting to order. May we have roll call?
Commissioner Bennick?
Here.
Commissioner Chapman? Commissioner Hallen?
Here.
Commissioner Hoyler?
Here.
Commissioner Smith? Vice Chair Summers?
Here.
Chair Blair?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Boyd, may we have our community and economic development report update, please?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, good evening. Brief update tonight. I'd like to start off with just to confirm the Commission had requested that Luke come out and speak regarding development and the noise contours, and they are confirmed to be here in February. So, secondly, development along at the Auto Mall along 303 continues to move at a quick pace. Nissan and Larry Miller Dodge are both operational and selling cars at this point, and we also just received plans for the new Toyota dealership. So a lot of activity out there, and it's developing nicely. And lastly, and probably one of the items that we're most excited about, is I'd like to introduce the Commission to our new planner, Nicole Arbeiter. As you know, we had a vacancy in October. We did a recruitment. We received 126 applicants, literally nationwide. We did a series of interviews, and very excited to have Nicole on board. So I'm going to ask Nicole to come forward and just introduce herself and talk a little bit about her education experience.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Nicole. You can call me Nikki. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I earned my bachelor's degree in planning, public policy, and management from the University of Oregon in Eugene. After that, I went to work for the City of Scottsdale Long Range Planning for 2.5 years. I got my master's degree in urban and environmental planning at ASU, and afterwards went up to the City of Cottonwood in the Verde Valley, about 2 hours north of here, and did both current and long range planning. While I was there, I also was chair of the bicycle committee, and the city earned bronze bicycle friendly community under me, so that was a good accomplishment. And I'm very excited to be here, and I have a lot of general plan update experience as well in both the town of Gilbert, City of Scottsdale, and Cottonwood. So I hope I can help with that project, get that project through, and then go on to work on many others. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Madam Chair, you'll be seeing a lot more of Nikki as we move through the general plan process. And that is all I have this evening.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open the hearing to a public hearing for any item that is not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members. My name is Martha Bales. I'm a former member of this commission and a member of the City Council. And the first general plan, or the 2000 general plan, is the one that we worked on as the Planning and Zoning Commission and got passed. So I just wanted to say, even though it's on the agenda, it's not an item to discuss, that I attended the open house in Sun City Grand. There were about 5 to 7 charts, big charts, and that was it. So with information like that, I don't know how the city thinks that the public is going to get involved. They could, if you had 2,500 survey, same thing in 2000, very few inputs from a city with 100,000 population in it. So that concerned me very much. So you're not going to get a whole lot of participation. And I also attended the GPAC meeting last night, and I was quite disappointed. So anyway, the second item I have to talk about is the city's policies related to planting trees, particularly in public parkways between sidewalks and curbs, In the center medians, like I'll use Bullard out here as an example, they've planted about 6 siso trees. I don't know if you guys realize they have a 30-foot canopy when they grow to be an old tree. You're going to end up taking them out, trimming them in boxed off sides. So I think the city needs to really, and planning and zoning, that should be an item for your 2013 plan, to look at these things and designate certain trees, because I understand through Sun City Grand, they have done the same thing, that the Arizona, whatever it is, has identified new trees that are much more suited for parkway places where you have a small area. So that might be something that you want to consider, because I think it's terrible. It looks awful. And you're going to have a mess, and it's going to be high maintenance. So those are my 2 items. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, may I have a motion to pass the December 6th minutes, please?
So moved. I would like to second that, but to add that there is a change in the part where it says adjournment, that Chair Blair was the one that made that motion, and that's corrected in the copy that she has to sign. So that was a second.
Commissioners, please vote at this time.
The motion has passed with a vote of 6 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go through the general plan survey results, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Tonight we are bringing you forward the general plan results. We started the general plan survey process in the end of June 2012. We concluded the process in end of October. We received over 2,500 surveys. Since then, for the month of November and December, we put together the entire survey results. The survey report was put together by our GIS specialist, Amy Izzo. She's here, and it fits right that she presents the entire presentation to you. I call Amy.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. As Vamshi mentioned, between June and October, we received over 2,500 survey responses from respondents whose age demographics you can see compared to the 2010 census on the screen, who also represent full-time residents, property owners, seasonal residents, business owners, and even a few non-residents across the entire general planning area. I'm going to do my best to condense the results into about the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll leave some time for questions in the end. The responses to each quantitative line item in the survey were classified into 5 tiers in order to compare their relative value across the entire survey. You may notice that some of the characteristics might appear in more than one tier as we go through them, and this is not an error. It's because more than one question on the survey addressed the topic, as is the case for recreation, for example, that appeared in both question 2 about the most important characteristics of the city, as well as in question 8, the focus of surprise for the next 20 years. In other words, while there is a great value in comparing each of the individual line items across the entire survey, it's also important to keep in mind the context in which they were rated by the survey respondents, which is by question, which we're going to go through shortly. The Tier 5 category represents those characteristics that survey respondents do not support, as evidenced by average ratings of less than 2 on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, and less than average variability among responses, meaning that the responses were fairly consistent in their very, very low ratings. The Tier 4 category represents those characteristics that received fairly neutral ratings on the 1 to 5 scale, but with greater variability among responses. This is to say that there was more disagreement among the responses, and that they were fairly inconsistent. The Tier 5 category represents those characteristics that received fairly neutral ratings on the 1 to 5 scale, but with greater variability among responses. This is to say that there was more disagreement among the responses, and that they were fairly inconsistent. Tier 3 category represents those characteristics that received reasonably high ratings with an average of about 3.75, but with moderate variability among responses. This is to say that in general, the survey respondents believe these things are quite important, but there was not enough consistency among the responses to consider them most important across the board. The Tier 2 category represents those characteristics that received high ratings with an average of about 4.25 on the 1 to 5 scale, and minimal variability among responses. This is to say that in general, the survey respondents believe these things are very important, and they expressed so consistently. And finally, the Tier 1 category represents those characteristics that receive the highest ratings with an average of about 4.5 on the 1 to 5 scale and the least amount of variability among responses. This is to say that in general, the respondents believe that these things are the most important, and there is high agreement about that. You will see these color codings through the responses for each individual survey question. So putting this in context, we'll look at the quantitative results for each of the 8 questions that we asked on the survey. Here in question 1, survey responses indicate a strong desire for focus on growth primarily through neighborhood centers that include grocery stores, shops, banks, restaurants, etc., and contiguous development that includes development next to existing roads, sewer, water, etc. Note that none of the line items from question 1 ended up in tiers 1 or 2 for the whole entire survey. Also note that nearly half of all responses indicate a desire for growth that does not include high-density residential, such as apartments, condos, and townhouses, and they oppose no growth. A number of qualitative comments were made about growth, including focusing on smart controlled growth, providing big city amenities with a small town feel, and infilling vacant commercial properties. Also, promoting pride of ownership communities that have low crime and high safety was of utmost importance. Here in question 2, we can see that according to survey responses, the most important characteristic of the city is safety, followed closely by physical appearance and recreation for all ages, including regional and local options. These top 3 were rated so highly and consistently that they are included in Tier 1 for the entire survey. On average, education, including private schools, colleges, high schools, and elementary schools, was ranked slightly more than somewhat important, as were neighborhood preservation and rehabilitation and transportation. Survey responses for arts and culture were mixed, and housing choices was ranked the least important characteristic of the city in this question. Here in question 3, we can see that having more east and west connections is the most important alternative for better transportation, followed by completing partially built streets, having fully connected sidewalks and bike lanes, including access to bike sharing centers, and alternative modes of transportation such as bus, passenger rail, and golf carts. Many of the qualitative comments were much aligned with the quantitative responses for this question, focused on having more east and west connections from Loop 303 to Loop 101 in order to facilitate better access in, through, and out of the city. Although some qualitative comments focused on the need for improved public transportation, as we saw in the last sign, this was considered the least important priority of the 4 options. Rather, what is considered more important is having a bike-friendly and a walking-friendly city that includes making bike lanes, connective and shared sidewalks, and trails a priority. Among those who advocated for public transportation, ideas about how to implement it were mixed. Some said that public bus options should be expanded, while others argued that bus options were unreasonable for meeting their transportation needs. Many did express support for a commuter rail or a light rail, especially to connect Surprise to Phoenix and the airport. Here in question 4, we see that having recreation for all ages was ranked the most important expanded recreation choice, followed by regional parks such as Surprise Lake and other large parks, recreation centers such as swimming pools, skate parks, and sports courts, trails, and neighborhood parks such as tot lots, splash pads, and dog parks. Respondents emphasized recreation as one of the most important characteristics of the city, and the qualitative comments were also clear in wanting recreation for all ages, regional parks, recreation centers, especially a centralized community recreation center that offers a variety of classes, year-round activities, etc., and indoor pool and local parks. There was also an explicit focus in the qualitative comments on entertainment. In addition to an overwhelming demand for family-friendly recreation and entertainment facilities, such as an amusement park, water park, theme park, miniature golf, and roller skating rink, there was also distinct demand for expanded arts and culture options, such as art centers, cultural centers, performing arts centers, museums, and creative galleries, even though arts and culture was ranked in Tier 3 overall. In question 5, survey responses indicate a strong focus on maintaining a safe and healthy community, primarily through clean streets and neighborhoods, safety through design, walkability, such as connected sidewalks, bike lanes, and trails, and neighborhood watch, followed by accessibility, educating the public, such as pool and fire safety, and more health facilities. In question 6, survey responses indicate strong support for economic development, focusing primarily on recruiting small businesses. This was ranked so highly and consistently that it is included in Tier 1 across the entire survey. Next, survey responses indicate a desired focus on incentives for new businesses, education jobs, and recruiting large businesses such as corporate headquarters. Finally, survey responses indicate desired focus on service sector jobs, such as medical and government jobs, industrial sector jobs, such as manufacturing and distribution, and finally, retail jobs. The most frequent qualitative comments across the survey were, "We want a Costco in Surprise," and "No more Walmarts." Overwhelmingly, qualitative responses adamantly oppose strip malls and chain establishments, such as fast food restaurants, chain restaurants, and quote-unquote box stores like Ross, Kohl's, PetSmart, etc., and instead focused on upscale shopping and small, unique boutique shops. In addition, survey responses support a focused interest on white-collar businesses as opposed to blue-collar business, in which Surprise would focus on attracting large corporations and corporate headquarters. When asked about sustainability, respondents indicated that a sustainable Surprise should focus foremost on water conservation and open space preservation, followed by maximizing renewable energy, such as solar panels, preserving wildlife habitats and corridors, incentivizing renewable energy for residential and commercial use, and utilizing green buildings. In question 8, we see that according to survey responses, clean and safe communities and economic development should be the top priorities for Surprise's focus over the next 20 years, followed by transportation, recreation, sustainability, and a downtown and/or regional and commercial mall. Tourism and a higher education campus, specifically a 4-year university with dorms, received neutral and inconsistent ratings, placing them both in the Tier 4 category overall. Even though a downtown and/or regional mall area ended up in the Tier 3 category, not in 1 or 2 as we might have expected, and ranked only 6th out of 8 options in the question about Surprise's focus for the next 20 years, in the quantitative survey, it was the focus of a number of qualitative comments. These comments supported a walkable downtown area that contains boutique shops, arts and culture, and entertainment. Their idea of a downtown area does not include large high-rise buildings, but rather a centralized place-making area where they can shop in non-chain stores, dine, and socialize. So taking into consideration all of the qualitative and quantitative survey results, this is what we can summarize as most important to the respondents. Maintain a clean, safe, and attractive community, economic development focused on small businesses and education jobs, transportation from east to west, recreation for all ages, family-friendly recreation and entertainment, and water conservation. And that is all I have pending your questions.
Commissioner Summers, any questions?
No questions for me. If I get my mic up.
Commissioner Euler? No. Commissioner Chapman?
Yes, I just have one. On the relationship of the age groups that are the respondents here, it looks like age group from 41 all the way up represents about 73% of the surveys. Is that correct? Or it was in the original.
I do have a
I'm not sure. Their pages aren't numbered, or I can't help you.
There we go.
The question I have is, what's the relationship between those respondents and the actual distribution of age in the city?
I'm not understanding your question completely.
If, example, 73% of the people are from age 41 up. And my question is, if that's the survey results that have been taken, what portion of that group represents the city as a whole?
Okay, so I'm understanding your question. The challenge that we had in comparing those to each other is that the age groups were not defined the same way. So the survey age groups went from below 18, and the second category was 18 to 25, then 26 to 40. The information that we have about the City of Surprise, that information came from the 2010 census. And so our categories are different. So unfortunately, it's impossible to do a one-to-one comparison. We tried our best by showing the two pie charts here so that you can see that, for instance, in the 25 to 44 age category, which is across the City of Surprise, we compare that to, and that's about 36%. Compare that in the orange to the general plan survey age groups, 26 to 40, and then probably some of the 41, well, definitely some of the 41 to 65 age group. So although we cannot compare them one-to-one, we think that there's a pretty equal distribution between the survey respondents and the census data. The one area that looks like there may be a larger deficit is in the under 25 category.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Commissioner Howland.
Could you go to the next slide, because one more after that, and then the next one. What bothers me a little bit, and I guess we'd have to go back and look at the questions, but there's some real conflicts in the results, which leads me to wonder how we can apply it. Like they put transportation in Tier 3, and then the first thing I see in Tier 2 is east-west transportation. I mean, I see this throughout. Like, we want Google here or some high-tech company, but we're not putting education very high. And when you look at where they're located where there's major universities and that kind of thing. So either it's the respondent group was biased in some way, or the questions were, because we're not really getting what I would consider a good, clear response.
I think that the responses are clear when you compare them in individual categories, meaning if you compare them qualitatively, so what are people saying? Not what responses are they giving 1 to 5, but what are they saying? We get pretty clear responses. When we look at the 1 to 5 responses, they're consistent within each question. And you're absolutely correct that when you look at them over the course of the entire survey, there are a lot of inconsistencies. Some of the issues with that may very well be just the survey design. We worked really hard to get a very solid survey design here, but it's the nature of the beast that there's going to be some room for error when you're doing these sorts of surveys. For instance, and I don't have it in front of me, but the recreation question was a big sticking point for us. In question number 2, which was, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, the most important characteristics of the city, recreation was one of the top ones. However, when we looked at, and I may be flip-flopping these, but when we looked at question 8 and asked about recreation, the small print on question 8, which wasn't present in question 2, said eco-friendly tourism and things of this nature, made more specific references, and we got different responses. So the purpose of breaking them out into tiers like this inherently brings a little bit of confusion because you're looking at it across the entire survey. But the purpose of doing that is to point out which ones stuck out as most important over the entire survey. And then if we need to break it down by question, we can do that. So we can say, if we're asking about transportation specifically, what do they want? look at the question about transportation. Does that answer your question at all?
Well, I'm probably less, of course I'm going to be biased because I always am, but I mean, you're looking at what is your beliefs, and you're looking at these questions, and I can interpret them any way I want in the end because there's so many conflicts, is what I think. I've got another question. There's a real bias towards high tech, and I can see why people would want that kind of jobs, but how does that match the skill sets of the city? Have we looked at that at all from the census data?
No. Vamshi, can you speak to that?
I mean, if we're going to say that, we've been pushing for industrial jobs in this town and been somewhat successful, and all of a sudden we're saying that shouldn't be a priority, but what's the skill set of the city? Because we're trying to put city people to work.
On top of my head, I do not have that data, but we can certainly look into that and compare it to what the people are saying.
Okay.
So I think it's also important to consider the entire general planning process and the survey being just one piece of it. This is why we have things like the GPAC committee. This is why we have things like the review process for everybody to give their input. This is one, I am not too confident saying small piece. It's a big piece. But it's coming from the residents, and that's resident input. And then we have a number of other avenues that are going to give other input to create the overall document. The inconsistencies are, it's a conceptual document, it's a conceptual survey, and the inconsistencies are just going to be there. That's kind of the way the process is going to play out.
Madam Chair.
I'm done.
Commissioner Bennett.
And I had a similar question to Commissioner Howland in the contradictions with the tiers, and I also had another question because Tier 4 and Tier 3 obviously have some very important issues in it. How is their placement in one of the lower tiers going to affect their implementation into the general plan itself? I mean, is this something where we're going to look at higher education because it's in Tier 4 is going to have less consideration than something that would be in Tiers 1 or 2?
I'm not a planner, so I'm not responsible for making the general plan document. So let me put that out there first.
If I may. Commissioner Bennett, I think to Amy's point a little earlier, this is one aspect of the information that we collect to comprise the general plan, and it's a synthesis of all of that information. And keep in mind that the general plan is, I mean, by its very title, is very general. It's an idea of where we want the city to go over the next 20 years from a very broad perspective, from 50,000 feet, if you will. And then we use other tools as we drill down all the way down to somewhat more site specific. And so clearly, I think the city values the higher education, and this is just where residents who were surveyed, who responded to the survey, happened to slot higher education. But obviously, we also have the GPAC committee. Your input as a commission will be heavily valued. We'll be taking a very similar presentation to the council. Their input will have significant value. So just keep in mind that these are just the results of one aspect of some data collection that we've done towards the general plan.
Then let me maybe try to ask this in a different way. How much weight is the placement of the tier going to have in the decision, in the final decision, I guess?
I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Amy, I think that the purpose of the tiers was just to be able to show you the results of the survey. It wasn't to ascribe a value necessarily as it moves forward to the general plan. And as we'll move on later in this evening, you're going to get a draft, and that's what it is, a draft of the general plan that I would recommend that you review and take a look at, and I think you'll see where some of that value has been placed. This was more just to, not so much a statistical analysis, but just an analysis of the information that came in from a quantitative standpoint.
And to clarify a little bit further, this is the result of a very long statistical analysis that comes across in very complex charts that frankly put people to sleep. So this was an attempt to try and generalize the information in a way that was more palatable, albeit having to introduce a little bit of confusion with it. As far as the tiers being exclusionary or keeping things in separate categories, I don't think that is the purpose of that. That is not the purpose of the tiers at all. As you can see, for instance, on question 1, we have tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5 responses on this, but there's not a huge difference between some of the averages and standard deviations among these tiers, and we're aware of that. So as I've worked, after I did all the statistical analysis, and as I've continued to work with the planning department and meet with the GPAC committee, I've been very clear that these are not very rigid, rugged categories by which we're going to say this is tier 3 or tier 4, so we need to get rid of it. That's not the case at all. It's a way to prioritize the respondents' input. Let's say this is what they said was most important, and we do have charts that will show this is the variation between how much they want this and how much they want this.
Okay, thank you.
So actually, it's a fact-finding mission that you were on with this. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, pretty much is. Commissioner Summers?
No.
Commissioner Hoyle?
I just, excuse me, I do have one question. Is it possible to have these, your age groups, the tiers broken down by the age groups themselves? Because my point being is that someone in 26 to 40 may have different selection of tier based on someone who's over 66. Demographically, you look at the communities themselves and possibly building towards the tiers on that. I mean, go to Sun City Grand, fabulous amenities with bike lane, I mean, everything. So if they're looking inside their community going, oh, well, we don't need bike lanes, we've got them all. Someone outside of that wants to commute to work has that issue. So it'd be neat to see the results by age group, tiered on age group.
Commissioner Chapman?
Yes, I don't want to open a door to statistical analysis, but it seems like we can get carried away with the data. I know that maybe using another methodology might produce different results and still have the argumentation. And I was thinking, that like in factor analysis, if you could take and do an inter-item analysis, and as well as doing correlation coefficients,
Okay.
that you can see the relationships that each question in each category or each tier would represent. And I know that it's a preference thing, but I think that seems like too much for something like this, personally. But I think that the information's there, but I think there's a few massaging things that could happen that help clarify maybe the thing like age groups, and the relationships between ages I think is important, because even though a majority of our respondents are on the top end or the upper end of age, if you will, this is a community of the future. And hate to say it, but some of those people, including me, may not be here to see the end of this one. So I think it's important to know age, and I think that there could be a real distinction between the respondents, or should their response versus the age. And I think that's an important issue that he brought up. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Commissioners, do you have any other comments? Okay. This does not require a public hearing, so thank you very much for it. We'll look forward to this all coming back at us. At this time, may we have the discussion regarding the general plan update?
Once again, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Tonight, I'm bringing forward to you the first draft of the General Plan 2035 document. Let me start with the update process that we started on in January, like a year before in 2012. From January to December 2012, we met with all the boards and commission. We did a lot of public outreach. We went to the spring training game, arts and cultural festival. We went to a lot of block parties. We did 3 open houses across the city, around Sun City Grand, in the Whitman area, as well as in the library. We formed the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, in May. We did a survey and we received over 2,500 surveys. And we did finish writing the first draft of the general plan in the end of the December. Starting January, we are again meeting with the General Plan Advisory Committee. Starting January 22nd, we are going to start our 60-day review process, ending around March 22nd. We are going to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission 2 to 3 times again. We are going to hold 2 public hearings, once at the City Hall, one out of the City Hall. We'll be holding 2 City Council public hearings as well. We plan to get it approved by the City Council by the end of May, and we look forward to go for voter ratification in November 2013 this year. Quick background about the update about the General Plan Advisory Committee. Currently, they are reviewing this document, the first draft of the document. GPAC has focused upon discussing, for the last 6 months, we discussed the various elements that make up the General Plan document. We also discussed about the newly drafted goals in the last few meetings that we had in December. The GPAC was very enthusiastic about participating in the public outreach that we did. They were very enthusiastic attending the open houses that we conducted and the surveys and getting out the word to the public as well. It was their main aim to make this a citizen-driven document. Just a quick look at general plan and what the planning hierarchy is. General plan is top of the tier. So looking at the 100,000 feet level, general plan sets the goals and policies for the city. It sets the goals and policies for all the departments and all the different various uses in the city, like transportation, fire, police, infrastructure, sustainability, environmental, every issue that we have in the city. The second tier is the specific plans, like a transportation master plan or a water master plan or village plans. The third tier is the strategic plan. The City Council can take the goals and policies set in the general plan and prioritize these goals in their strategic plan. Then we can implement those goals and policies with like site plans and zoning ordinances. And this is the planning hierarchy. The general plan chapters itself, we have around 19 elements that are mandated by the state. When you look at this document and this slide, all the red ones are mandated by the state. And then we have 4 other elements like economic development, urban design, education, and arts and culture. These are very specific to the community. And these are optional, and the citizens have said that they are looking forward to these other elements too. A quick look at the document. We did give all the commissioners a copy of the general plan. We call the new General Plan 2035. It was by advice from the GPAC committee that we named the General Plan 2035 to differentiate it from the 2030 document that was not ratified. Again, it will have 5 different chapters: development, quality of life, transportation, resources, and finance and infrastructure, followed by implementation chapter. A quick look at the differences between the 2030 document and the 2035 document. Even for the 2030 process, around 2007 and 8, we did a lot of sessions and open houses. This is where we actually derived the village planning aspects from those citizen participation ideas. So we are going to continue with our village planning in the 2035 document as well. The issues haven't changed much in terms of transportation and recreation services and the wish list of the residents from the surveys. The issues haven't changed much from the 2030 to the 2035 document. Sustainability was a big aspect of the 2030 document, and we covered a lot of issues. But in the 2035 document, sustainability is more oriented toward water conservation. And land use maps, there is no change in both the general plans. The 2030 document had a vision, we call it the One City, Many Choices, with a connection between building heritage, neighborhood matters, and global village. But with this new one, I think we are we created this vision looking at the 2,500 surveys that we received, also the comments from the general plan advisory committees. We held more than a dozen meetings over the last 6 months. So we took their advice, and the vision is a clean and safe community. That was the highest priority in the survey, and planning for a clean and safe and attractive neighborhood communities. Economic development that will focus on small businesses is another higher priority. Sustainable surprise, again, focusing mainly on water conservation. Transportation, again, connecting the east-west connections, followed by, this time there was a much more interest on bike lanes, walking trails, and commuter rail as well. Again, recreation for all ages. And this forms the vision for this new document. And these were all derived from the surveys as well as the comments from the General Plan Advisory Committee. The major talking points in the entire document, the land use element, there are no changes to the land use map. Growth, we have identified certain areas like downtown areas in the growth document. Urban design, we are going to continue with our character-based zoning or transit zoning from the smart code. And right now we are currently under our doing our code update, and probably around 5 to 6 years from now, we would like to look at going forward with a form-based code, and we have one of those as part of our urban design element. Transportation, this time we are including land use integration with transportation. Also, we are also considering environmental issues in transportation, as well as complete streets and non-motorized vehicles like bike lane and sidewalks. Expanding education. Higher education was one of the major issues that was brought up during our GPAC discussions. Even though higher education was one of on the lower tiers, on tier 4, but talking with GPAC all these months, I think higher education, they wanted to see some kind of higher education campus. It could be a four-year college or a technical university or something, and they wanted it to be placed in the downtown area, in the Surprise Center area, so that it could be a catalytic force that can actually develop the downtown of Surprise. Another major talking point is economic development with major focus on small businesses and higher education. Again, downtown, which also includes arts as a major focus for the downtown. Expanding arts and cultural element, this was from our Arts and Cultural Board Advisory Committee. They were very vocal about their vision for the arts and cultural aspect of the city, and they actually came up with this idea of creating an arts master plan. So we have included that in our new general plan. Recreation, again, recreation for all ages and keeping in with the standards for the parks and open space according to population. Conservation element, we have included the wildlife corridors. You might remember in 2011, one of our other planners did a major general plan amendment which included wildlife corridors across the White Tank Mountains, across all the Trilby Wash area. So we are carrying that over from the 2011 amendment to this document. Next step in this process, we are going to meet with the General Plan Advisory Committee 2 to 3 more times. We will be beginning our 60-day review process starting January 22nd. We are going to continue our public outreach with a few more meetings with the citizens, like open houses. We are going to meet with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We will be conducting 2 more public hearings. We are going to meet with the City Council for 2 more public hearings as well, followed by a November public vote. And that concludes my presentation. Questions?
Commissioner Bennett.
I have no questions.
Commissioner Howard.
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple comments. One, next time we get a draft, could we get better graphics of the maps?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Or at least a reference, because some of these maps are important and they're...
Okay, we'll definitely look into that.
I do have a couple, I guess I'll probably send you a letter. Is that how we're going to handle our comments, or do you want all our comments discussed tonight?
You can actually send his comments
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hallen, we can certainly take comments individually, as Vamshi indicated, and we'll talk about in your work plan. We'll be back before the commission several times, and so we can also entertain comments at that time. So it really would be your preference and how you would like to submit those comments.
Well, let me raise a few right here. First off, there was a mention in here of the spas, but the village has replaced that, right?
Yes.
There will be no more spas.
I'm sorry, spas?
Yeah, special planning area, whatever there.
No, with the 2008 general plan, we are moving forward with the
We
village
got rid of them
planning
then
area.
already? We got rid of them with the last amendment, is that what you're saying?
Yes, so we are going to just continue with the village planning.
Okay. Hey, what is a universal home design?
It's a universal home design. It's suitable from a kid to elder citizens. It's suitable for all ages, from babies to teenagers to adults to seniors. So that home design can include everyone, including granny flats and things like that. It's a new concept. It's a home design that can accommodate all age groups.
It isn't fully defined, I don't think, in the document. It's discussed,
okay.
but it isn't defined, and it was a new term. On page 72, we have a goal and a policy relating to building in floodplains. It's goal 6, policy 3. We say we discourage development in a 100-year floodplain. Can't we prohibit it? I mean, I can't see that I would ever vote for a building in a 100-year floodplain.
If I may. Development within the floodplain is actually regulated by Development Services and then also by the Maricopa County Flood Control District. So it's not to say that there can't be any development, it's just the regulations within those plains, within the floodplain.
I mean, we say we discourage it. I think we need to be stronger than discourage in the floodplain.
We can certainly state that, but just keep in mind that the Maricopa County and the federal government have regulations that deal with that specifically.
And if somebody slid one through, I can't imagine that we would agree to it here. That's why.
Actually, that would come before us at a meeting, in each individual case. If that were to come up at that time, then we would have to
prohibit. I mean, I wouldn't. It would be
really prohibit, though.
I think we could be stronger than discourage. I mean, if you can work in whatever the law or the regs are, it sounded kind of. On page 75, we were talking about colleges. You don't need to find it because I have a general question. Didn't the Maricopa Community College or one of these community colleges buy a tract of land up off of Grand Avenue and about Dove Valley Road about 5 years ago? Isn't there a plan for that?
I'm not familiar with that.
You might look back through the council minutes, but it seemed to me like there was a major land purchase.
And there may have been a land purchase that wouldn't necessarily have been within the council minutes, but I'm certainly not aware of that.
Anyway, maybe they never went through with it, but I thought that it was kind of up what at that time we were calling North City Center or something. Remember that? Maybe that was before. And there was a purchase of some land by the college, Maricopa Community College, I think.
Commissioner Allen, I'm not aware of that, and I haven't
anyway,
heard
I thought you might want to look into that if that's the case. That it's an unusual location, but it would fit into our long-range plan. On page 116, you indicate that there are no fissures within the city limits of Surprise. In the new map, and I'll give you a copy if you want it, because this came up before when we were considering some development. North of Peoria, between Saraville and Reams, there's been some reported fissures, and I think it's something we need to consider if you want the map. It's on the Maricopa County Fissure Study page. Page 144, I think in that section we talk about the importance of medical and having a trauma center. And in the narrative, we say we would like to encourage a trauma center. It seemed like we needed something in the goals that said that was one of our goals, to have a trauma center in the city, in the hospital. It was discussed in the narrative, but we didn't set a goal. And it seems like we've discussed this previously in a planning meeting, and I think it's a goal we need to consider.
Commissioner Hallen, we can certainly entertain that idea. You have to please keep in mind that ultimately that requires a private developer who desires to locate a trauma center here.
Well, no, it's a goal to try and get one. It's like a goal to get private business. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Right? I mean, we say that that's important in the narrative. It seems like it should be a goal.
Okay.
We talk about water supply being predominantly well water. Did that change with the opening of that new plant, or are we still predominantly well water in the city?
I don't know that we would be prepared to talk about that this evening, but we could certainly have somebody from Public Works at our next general plan meeting.
I mean, on page 120, we talk about where we get the water, and I know we used to get a lot of it from wells, but I thought with the opening of the plant on Cactus that we went to.
Commissioner Allen, I can tell you that section was developed in conjunction with Public Works, and their experts certainly helped draft that particular section. So if that emphasis is on well water, that would lead me to believe that that's their focus.
Okay.
But we can certainly have somebody at the next meeting be able to speak to that directly.
I mean, I know that was the focus of the other things. So yeah, on page 138, you have a section that discusses Public Works and the importance of timely maintenance, I guess, of the roads. You have a good roads cost less graph in there, is what I call it. But we don't have any goals on maintaining our roads or trying to meet those objectives. And it seemed like we needed to work in a policy and goals on maintaining what we've got, and I think we need a policy and goal to get something a little better, or to give incentives for developers that put in better roads. I mean, I'm just amazed at how poor our streets are in a town this new. And I think we discuss it in the section, but we don't have any goals and objectives. It seems like we need it.
Commissioner Howell, your point is certainly well taken. I don't know that every other member of the commission has had an opportunity to review the document.
Well, that's why I say, well, how do you want my comments, and you're getting them.
I think at this time I would like to, because we are having a workshop on this.
Right.
Commissioner Allen, I think you've brought up a lot of good points, but I do believe it's something that all of us should kind of look at. If you could put them in writing and send them to them, then I expect that by the time we have our workshop, all of us would get the correct answers that we're looking for.
Okay, well, let me back up. We're having a separate workshop?
We're having several workshops on this.
That was
Commissioner
why I
Holland,
asked
as
in
it
the
was,
beginning to see what I should do, and I didn't.
As we mentioned, yes, we'll be coming back before the commission several times.
With the workshops. Okay, well, I've kind of got my major points, and okay. I'm not going to sit here and give you every editorial comment.
But you should still send them in.
Okay, I mean, that was why I asked in the beginning. I didn't know whether you wanted to hear this.
I'd like to have them sent in, if you can draw that up. Thank you. Commissioner Chapman.
Yeah, I also had the same comment about the maps. I was trying to think back. We had recreation maps that were outlined where you had parks in certain areas, and then collectively, I'm not sure what the radius was. There was a large recreation park area, such as our campus over here. And we had it outlined in nice little circles, but I didn't notice that in this particular plan. I didn't know if that was part of the previous plan that we had heard this from, or it was omitted, or the maps that are presented, I couldn't identify what the relationship was, what we were trying to achieve. Is anybody familiar with what I'm speaking about?
Village plan?
Commissioner Chapman, I'm not familiar with that map, but I think what we certainly could do is we could certainly get electronic copies of the maps and send them to you electronically, and then if you're still looking for an additional map, we'd be happy to see if we can locate that and send it out to the commission members.
Yeah, I think it's very well done. That's why I'm asking the question, because we have that maps have been presented to us and we've seen them. Also, we have quite a document here, and I know that we went through the 20-year plan here not too long ago, within a couple of years ago, and I know that we have some new input, and I was curious as to what the relationship was to the previously adopted plan that we had probably, maybe 2 years ago, before I went to vote, and this current plan. And is there any major differences or just minor differences, format, anything that's a little different?
The plan that was adopted in 2001, we had a population of around 30,000 or less. So the requirements by the state were very few. We didn't have all these 22 elements. We didn't have education or design. We did have some of the elements. Let me get back to
Let me share with you, I don't want to go back quite that far, because just a few years ago, we'd had what was it called, a 2020
2030.
plan, or that was a 2030 plan that we approved. And my question is there any major differences between that plan and this, and have those differences been identified anywhere?
Not in the document, but we can certainly add that in our presentations and in our staff reports.
Well, I'm just curious that the new survey and things, if that might have changed things slightly.
That comparison might be interesting, though, so
Yeah.
that
Usually,
could be something we'd
in a policy statement, usually if you had differences, that it would be nice to know what those policy differences might be. I'm sure there's probably not too many, because I thought the plan before was pretty well designed too. So,
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we can certainly bring back a summary of the changes from the plan that was last approved before the commission.
and I just had one other question. I noticed in reading about and I had it located a minute ago, but we're talking about deferred maintenance and other kinds of activities in the financial section. And I was wondering on whether it be street improvement or capital buildings or even equipment under each department, whether or not in the financial, I guess, information side of this, is whether or not there's defined deferred maintenance programs where those things are identified and that they are accounted for in either reserves or other things to make for sure that with the depletion or depreciation of a particular item, that it is accounted for, and by the time it's due to be replaced, let's say, or repaired, that there's money in the reserves to account for that. And I was just curious if how that would work. To me, it's a policy issue. You say this is what we'd like to achieve, but do we have it financially stating that? Is the question.
I think we will certainly look into that and make sure we have certain policies that addresses your concerns.
Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Commissioner Heiler.
I do. Thank you for your time. It's kind of intermingled with the survey itself. Looking at the survey and then also our village planning, demographically, if we're going to be setting village planning, wouldn't we want our surveys more accurately defined tier-wise based on the demographics, the ages? If we're planning a village for a younger community based on, and it's not to offend anybody, based on input from a 66 and older data, to me that would be somewhat flawed, because as a 40-year-old I would look to lean a different way possibly. So that's where I was, getting to the point of the data on the surveys being more tiered based on the population that were pulled on that. And the second thing, and I went through it, and like we've always talked about general plan, I always get on the bicycle side of it. I didn't see in there where there's coordination between our surrounding partners or cities where we're going to tie in their existing bike lanes. If someone's going down Saraville or wherever it's at, our bike lane's beautiful, and then bam, it ends because theirs is on another street. It's all for naught. Why? We wouldn't want to waste the money doing it. I wouldn't even do it because no one's going to commute that. So that's something I think is integral in making that successful, because people actually move to cities based on bicycling. It's you read the reports and they're there. So that's something I think that really needs to be looked at. This is the final one. I did look in there about setting up bike facilities with bike lockers, showers, and a lot of those things. I think it's great if the city didn't have to pay for it, but I just don't honestly see how an individual, honestly, that's commuting to work that has a $3,000 to $5,000 bicycle is going to leave it on a bike rack or an attended facility. I would like to see more public facility or public buildings or whatnot have interior locations for a lot of those things, providing showers, providing those different things. Your family that's riding to the park aren't going to take showers, aren't going to do any of those things. They're going to go play and ride their bike home. Now, if you're on the commuter aspect of it, someone that you're looking to commute to work or back and forth, they're going to look for something that's inside. That's just a personal opinion, I guess. But that's no one's going to leave a very, very expensive bike outside for someone else to watch. And I think it would be a huge liability issue if someone's $5,000 bike got stolen. Who's responsible for that? So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Summers.
I just have a couple issues, and one of them is how the goals are stated in the document, and there's a consistency issue, and some of them are written in the future tense, which is what you would expect to see, and some of them are written in the present tense. And for example, land use determination surprise are fiscally sound. That's a statement like it already exists. And it probably should read, provide that land use determination surprise is fiscally sound. In other words, use an action word like provide, ensure, promote, develop, secure, something that shows it's a future action, not just, and there's different places in here, probably four or five different places where it goes to like it's already been completed. So there's a consistency issue there that needs to be addressed. And then the second thing is on education on page 76, and I'll just read this. The goal is goal number 3, Surprise has a well-educated workforce, prepared citizenry, okay? And then the second policy under that is locate and site an appropriate mix of high-quality primary, secondary, post-secondary education facilities, blah, blah, blah. The goal isn't, the goal is workforce, and one of the ways to get that is education facility. And my concern is for the secondary schools, when we do a plan development, you have the developer include a site for an elementary school, and it happens, the site's there. For a community college or for a university, it's a bigger footprint. It's not going to happen unless we say we really want it and we work towards that as a goal. So my question is, can we have a goal that says secure or designate a site for a community college or university? Or to make that a line item. Thank you.
Commissioner Chapman, you had another comment?
Yes, I had to follow up on the bike trail, that I know that we had were presented a maybe a wish list for for the I think it was for the general plan of showing trails throughout the whole community of the areas for Surprise for the planning area as well as the city of Surprise. And because the map is different, I can't identify whether or not it shows those trails or not. Is that something that is part of this plan? Do you know? I mean, there was a real well-defined plan that I think Hobart shared with us at one time.
It does. We did include one of the maps taken from the Parks and Trails Master Plan that Hobart might have discussed to you in the past. We did include all the trail maps and all the bike lanes in one of the maps in here. It's called the non-motorized vehicles map.
Well, I know there's a map there, but I think because it's probably not in color or something, it may be not showing up.
Clarity is an issue.
Yeah. And then there's also another issue. I know reading in the area of recreation and parks where we have a lot of HOAs that have their own individual parks, and there's a desire from reading this that the city at some point might want to take that into the city based upon whether or not they're able to maintain the park or not. And I don't want to get into that part of it, but there's also a section there that said that they're going to hire an individual or hire somebody to maintain any new park. And I was thinking in a policy statement, I would think that you may want to soften that up a little bit and say that you would hire, people to maintain any new parks or whatever come into play, rather than designate a number of one person that may take two or may take a half a person. I think in a policy statement that it should just be that you'll hire the appropriate staff in order to maintain it. It was just a comment that I had. So, and I know it sounds like real unhappy or something or grumpy, but very, very valuable document. And I think that when we have to look down the road of the value and importance of it, that people are critical about it. And I think that it's an important document. I think that people have done a good job in maintaining it. I'm not sure who was responsible for writing the plan. It's very, very well written and very easy to read. I would really hope that our community would take time to see how much work and effort has gone into this. And I know it's not a perfect plan, none are, but I think if the community could see and understand the amount of care that's taken to try to develop the city, I think would be a real asset to everybody here. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, this does not require a hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have the discussion on our workshops, please.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, a quick presentation on the work plan calendar. As you know, the Mayor and Council asked all the boards and commissions to develop an annual work plan, and so submitted for your review and approval is a plan for 2013. If you notice the calendar of items, you'll notice essentially 4 trends. The first trend being long-range planning. As we've discussed a couple times this evening, the general plan will be coming before you 2 more times in the spring, lastly in May for recommendation and approval. Also, you'll be receiving 2 Village 5 plan updates throughout the year. The second area of focus is neighborhood services, starting with public service applications for community development block grant money, to be followed by the annual action plan, and then later in the year, the consolidated annual performance evaluation report regarding that action plan. And then supplemented with that will be the Surprise Neighborhood Award Program in May as well. The third area of focus will be code development. I think as Vamshi alluded to, we've been working on a revision to the Surprise Uniform Development Code. We will start bringing you drafts of some of those revisions starting in June, and we'll bring it over the course of several months so that we don't have to digest the entire document in one sitting. And then lastly, transportation. And the Transportation Planning Manager, Karen Savage, will be coming back twice throughout the year to give updates regarding transportation. Unless there's any questions, I would submit this work plan for your approval.
Commissioners, any questions?
I just have a question regarding the general plan workshop in January. Is that scheduled, or or is this considered the workshop?
This is considered the workshop.
Okay. I was wondering whether there's another one. Thank you.
Commissioners, may I have a motion? I'm sorry.
We have to hold 2 public hearings, don't we, for the general plan?
Yes, we do, and we are holding 2 public hearings. The first public hearing will be in April, and the second one will be in May.
So both those meetings will have a public general plan?
Both of those will be public hearings.
Okay. And they'll be at the regular meetings?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve this workshop schedule?
I move to approve the 2013 Planning and Zoning Commission Workshop Plan.
Second.
At this time, commissioners, please vote.
The motion carries with a vote of 6 ayes and 1 absent.
Madam Chair, if I could now, based on your approval, if I could just have some direction from the commission, we would be happy on your behalf to convey this plan back to the council if you see fit, or you also would obviously have the opportunity to present the plan at a council meeting as a commission. And I just would like to know your preference so that we can ensure that that happens.
My plan is to have you take that to the city council.
Okay, and we can just do that via staff report.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.
Could I ask the planners to stick around for just a second for me?